The trainer didn't recognize him at first. Just another guy in a hoodie, showing up 5 minutes early and asking where the squat rack was. But when he realized it was Tom Cruise and saw what he did next, the entire gym went silent. Tom Cruise had arrived just after 6 in the morning, walking into the downtown Los Angeles training facility alone. He had no entourage, no press handler, no security. Only a gray hoodie pulled low over his head and a quiet determination in his stride. For someone whose name drew crowds in every country on earth, Tom had an unusual habit of moving through the world like he owed it nothing except his work. And this morning, he had work to do. The gym was nearly empty, save for a few early risers pounding out silent miles on treadmills or lifting weights in steady rhythm. It was not the kind of luxury studio that usually attracted celebrities. It was rough around the edges. Industrial lighting, chalk dust in the air. The kind of place where people showed up for pain, not pictures. Tom liked that. He walked over to the front desk and gave his name. The young man, checking him, and looked up from his tablet. Early 20s. Eager to impress. His eyes widened slightly when he recognized the name, but he tried to play it cool. "You're serious?" the man asked. "Tom Cruise. Like the actual guy?" Tom gave a small smile. "Just here for the workout." The receptionist laughed. "Didn't think you guys actually did your own training. Figured you had some secret underground science lab where they inject you with superhero serum or something." Tom didn't laugh. He simply asked which trainer was available. That's when Evan walked over. Evan was the kind of trainer who believed pain-built character and personality was optional. He had trained boxers, bodybuilders, and one very famous influencer who refused to be named. Evan didn't care about who Tom Cruise was. Or if he did, he wasn't showing it. He gave Tom a quick once-over. "You're shorter than I expected," he said. "You ever lift anything heavier than a stunt double?" There was no malice in the voice, just sharpness, like someone who liked to test the line between confidence and disrespect. Tom looked at him calmly. "I do my own stunts," he said. "But sure, let's lift." Evan smirked. "We'll see." And with that, the workout began. It started like any other session. Warm-ups, mobility drills, basic conditioning. Evan explained the movements, and Tom followed them without question. His form was good. His focus was absolute. He moved without ego, which surprised Evan. But Evan pushed harder. He increased the weight, cut the rest times, started throwing in backhanded remarks between sets. "You know," Evan said as Tom finished a brutal series of Bulgarian split squats, "I used to think all actors were soft. Then again, most of them still are." Tom nodded, catching his breath. "You're not wrong. Some are." Evan raised an eyebrow, surprised at the lack of defensiveness. By the end of the second hour, sweat poured down Tom's face. His shirt was soaked. His arms trembled slightly with fatigue. But he never asked for a break. Never checked his phone. Never once brought up who he was. That only made Evan push harder. "Most people with your bank account would have tapped out by now," Evan said, "or sent their assistant in their place." Tom looked at him, steady and quiet. "Why would I send someone else to do my work?" It wasn't said with pride. It wasn't meant to win a point. It was said the way someone might say, "The sun rises in the east." As if there was no other version of reality worth believing. For the first time that morning, Evan was caught off guard. The next circuit was brutal. Weighted sled pushes, deadlifts, pull-ups with a weighted vest. Tom moved through each one with the precision of someone who had learned discipline the hard way. Not through applause, not through money, but through a lifelong refusal to let external praise shape internal standards. As they took a short water break, Evan leaned against the wall, watching Tom recover. He was still trying to figure him out. "You're different than I thought you'd be," Evan admitted. Tom shrugged. "People usually are." Evan took a sip of water. "So why do this? You've got nothing to prove." Tom looked at him, serious now. "You're wrong. I've got everything to prove. Every day." Evan narrowed his eyes. "To who?" "To myself." The words hung there between them. The gym had filled up by now. A few younger trainers had noticed the session. Some started whispering to each other, unsure if they should say something. A couple of them laughed when Evan, the alpha among them, looked like he was being humbled in his own house. But Evan wasn't offended. He was learning. What he didn't know was that Tom Cruise had built his life on moments like these. Rooms where people underestimated him, where people assumed the smile meant softness, where the fame meant he'd forgotten what work felt like. They didn't see the nights he had trained until his body collapsed, the injuries he recovered from without complaint, the hours spent learning not how to look like a hero, but how to become someone who didn't flinch under pressure. What Evan didn't know was that Tom didn't train for cameras. He trained for clarity. And in that gym, under fluorescent lights and faded equipment, he was getting exactly what he came for. But Evan wasn't done, and the real test hadn't started yet. Evan watched Tom wipe sweat from his brow, the quiet steadiness still intact in his eyes. The man hadn't broken. He hadn't asked for mercy or validation. And the more Evan tried to provoke him, the more Tom leaned into the silence between them. It was unsettling. But Evan wasn't ready to let go. "Let's go heavier," he said. Tom nodded once. "All right." They walked to the squat rack. Evan loaded the plates, throwing on a number that would challenge anyone over 50. Tom didn't flinch. He stepped under the bar, braced himself, and lowered his body slowly, deliberately. Each rep was precise, controlled. Not just strength, but respect for the movement. Evan stood nearby, arms crossed. He expected a struggle, a wobble, maybe even a bailout. But Tom completed the set without a word. "You don't talk much," Evan said. Tom racked the bar and stepped back. "Words are easy." Evan nodded, hiding the flicker of something behind his smirk. "And effort's hard." Tom grabbed a towel, wiped his hands, then looked him in the eye. Effort reveals character. It wasn't a retort. It was a lesson, and Evan felt it. By now, the mood in the gym had shifted. The early mockery that some of the other trainers had passed around had faded. People had stopped pretending not to watch. One of the younger trainers, barely out of college, approached during a water break and asked Tom if he really did that halo jump in Mission Impossible. Tom smiled, nodded, and gave a single sentence about the preparation that went into it. Then he returned to the sled without another word. He hadn't come to relive his stunts. He had come to work. And that quiet discipline was becoming difficult to ignore. Evan motioned toward the pull-up bar. "All right, let's see how long that grip holds out." They added a weight vest again. Tom climbed up without hesitation. His body rose and fell in clean rhythm, each rep slower than the last, but never rushed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His arms trembled, but he never gave up the form. Not once. And Evan, for the first time, saw it clearly. This wasn't about fitness. This wasn't about proving toughness or surviving the set. This was a man with nothing to gain and everything to lose, still choosing effort over ease. Still choosing humility over ego. Still choosing to carry weight that no one else could see. As Tom dropped from the final pull-up, landing softly, Evan stared at him. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. Tom looked at him, expression unchanged. "I underestimated you," Evan said. "Figured you'd act like the rest. Like the industry owed you something." Tom leaned against the wall, catching his breath. The industry doesn't owe anyone anything. Especially not the ones who forget what they're doing it for. Evan let that sit for a while. He grabbed 2 water bottles from the fridge, tossed one to Tom, and leaned back against the wall. "You don't seem angry," he said. "After all the pushing, the shots, the jokes." Tom took a sip. "You don't learn anything by reacting to noise." Evan chuckled, but the sound wasn't mocking anymore. "And here I thought I was testing you." "You were," Tom said. "But not for the reason you think." Evan raised an eyebrow. "You wanted to see if I was weak," Tom continued. "But you didn't ask what strength actually looks like." Evan frowned slightly. "So what does it look like to you?" Tom turned, looking at the others now watching them from across the room. "It looks like showing up when nobody's watching. Doing the work when it doesn't pay any attention. Listening more than speaking. And refusing to pretend that your name makes you better than anyone else." Evan was quiet for a long time. Then he laughed softly, not at Tom, but at himself. "You're not what I expected." Tom shrugged. "People rarely are. If you give them time." The next set was supposed to be the finisher. A circuit designed to push anyone past the limit. It involved rowing, box jumps, kettlebell swings, and battle ropes. Evan called it the purge. Most clients barely finished. Some didn't. But Tom nodded like it was just another step forward. He moved through each station with a methodical pace. No drama, no performance, just intention. When it ended, Tom sat down against the wall, soaked in sweat, chest heaving. Evan walked over and dropped beside him. "You know," Evan said, "when you walked in here this morning, I thought you were just another Hollywood guy trying to prove something." Tom didn't respond. "But now I think you're just a man trying not to forget." Tom looked over. "Forget what?" Evan shrugged. "Why it mattered in the first place." Tom smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile people were used to seeing in movie trailers. It was quiet, honest, worn in by years. "That's the only thing worth remembering," he said. And for a moment, the room fell quiet again. Not because of who he was, but because of what he had shown. Later that day, the gym's manager asked to speak with Evan privately. He wasn't in trouble. There were no complaints. Quite the opposite, actually. The manager had received 2 emails and 1 handwritten note from longtime gym members who had watched the interaction between Evan and Tom Cruise and felt compelled to say something. They weren't praising celebrity. They were praising humility. And it had come from both men. One note read, "It's rare to watch someone get challenged and not retaliate. But it's even rarer to watch the challenger become the student." Evan folded the note slowly and stared at it for a while. He didn't reply to the manager. He just nodded, left the office, and walked back toward the main floor. Tom was gone by then. No fanfare. No farewell. Just a quiet departure after hours of silence, sweat, and endurance. He had left the gym the same way he had entered, unannounced and unaffected. But the space felt different now. People weren't just talking about the workout. They were talking about what it meant to witness someone who had every reason to act entitled choose instead to be grounded. People who had once rolled their eyes at celebrity now found themselves reflecting on their own posture, their own discipline, their own approach to struggle. And Evan, for his part, couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in him too. He kept seeing Tom's face as he spoke that last line. "That's the only thing worth remembering." Evan didn't fully understand why it stuck. Maybe because it wasn't said with drama. Maybe because Tom had never once tried to impress anyone, even when challenged. Or maybe because Evan had spent too long confusing intimidation with respect. Later that week, Evan found himself working with a new client. A teenager. He was lanky, self-conscious, and clumsy with the weights. After missing 2 reps, the kid looked down and muttered, "I'm probably just not built for this." And for reasons Evan couldn't quite explain, he didn't respond the way he normally would. He didn't tease. He didn't push harder. He just crouched down, looked the kid in the eye, and said, "Effort reveals character." The words came out before he realized he was repeating them. But they worked. The kid blinked, nodded, and got back under the bar. And Evan stood, realizing that something about the way he coached had already begun to change. It wasn't just Tom's strength that had landed with him. It was his restraint, his refusal to perform, his willingness to let effort speak louder than any rebuttal. For years, Evan had made a name for himself by challenging people to prove themselves under pressure. But what Tom had shown him was something different. That strength was never loud. That dignity didn't require defense. And that sometimes, the real lesson wasn't what you could make someone do in the gym, but what kind of person you became after they walked out. Later that month, a short article appeared in an industry blog. It was about celebrity gym etiquette and titled, "When Stars Don't Show Off." It included a short story, unnamed, uncredited, about a well-known actor who had entered a Los Angeles training facility and quietly dismantled every stereotype about Hollywood ego. The post ended with a quote from an unnamed trainer who simply said, "He didn't say much, but somehow, I heard everything." Evan had written it, not for recognition, not for praise, but because sometimes the only way to honor someone's quiet strength is by choosing to reflect it, even if no one knows you did. Weeks passed, and the story of that morning faded from the surface. But not from memory. Tom Cruise never mentioned it in interviews. He didn't tweet about the gym. He didn't post a carefully framed photo on Instagram. There were no viral clips, no brand deals, no curated behind-the-scenes video with motivational music. There was only the quiet impact of presence. And for the people who had been there, the other trainers, the clients, the assistants wiping down equipment, that impact lingered. not because of who he was, but because of how he chose to be. One afternoon, Evan found himself walking home later than usual. His mind wandered, thinking about how easily he used to dismiss people he thought had never struggled. How quickly he had assumed that fame erased vulnerability. How eager he had been to knock someone off a pedestal that, in reality, they'd never asked to stand on. He thought about Tom showing up without a camera crew, about the way he breathed through the last pull-up, face tight with pain but posture unbroken, about the line he had dropped at the end, the one that felt like it had followed Evan home. Better to be forgotten than be remembered for silence. That line had changed something, not just in how Evan trained others, but in how he saw himself. He had always told clients that discipline builds strength, but now he saw something else too. That restraint is part of that discipline, that it takes more effort to stay steady under scrutiny than to lash out in defense, that the quietest person in the room is often the one carrying the heaviest load. A few days later, Evan received a letter. It was handwritten, folded neatly, no return address. Inside was a simple message. Evan, thanks for the workout. You pushed hard, and I respect that. Know that how you show up matters, even when you don't think anyone's watching. Some people need to be seen. Others just need to be believed in. Today, you gave someone both. TC. Evan read the note twice. Then he tucked it away, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Because the truth was, for all the times he had measured strength in weight and muscle and sweat, that one morning had shown him a different metric. A kind of character that didn't need a spotlight. A kind of strength that didn't need applause. And a kind of presence that didn't ask for anything, but left behind something that wouldn't be forgotten. Not because it was loud, but because it was true. And in a world that often confused noise for meaning, that kind of truth was the rarest strength of all.